The word vampire means many things to many people, and a lot of these meanings depend largely on when the word vampire is being used. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, vampires were youthful alternative types with troubling connections to high schoolers, making them a bit like YouTubers, but if YouTubers drank more blood. In the 1990s, you may think of vampires as being like Tom Cruise, or alternatively, Tom Cruise in Interview with the Vampire. And for many years, you may have thought of them as those tennis and baseball referees, but despite all of these different kinds, it would be hard to imagine a more iconic vampire archetype than that of Dracula. Or his strange German knockoff, Count Orlok, or Nosferatu. Both of them work. And it turns out there's a Nosferatu video game, and no, I do not mean Slendrina X. I mean Nosferatu, the Wrath of Malachi. Let's take a look at it. Coming from Swedish development studio IdleFX in the year of our Lord 2003, Nosferatu became something of a cult classic among horror fans. And you can tell it's a cult classic because every company attached to the game, plus a few related companies caught in its accursed reach, are all dead. Not in the spooky sense, but instead the harrowing financial one. And a lot of the fans of the game discovered it some years after its initial release. Like me, I discovered it in late 2011 after PewDiePie released a Let's Play about it. There's a lot to unpack there, and we do not have time. And when I was a teenager, Nosferatu had such a strong appeal to me. Not only was it a cool, heavily stylized gothic horror game with some genuine frights, but it also had a more unplaceable, esoteric appeal that I can't quite nail down. And I've mentioned the game on and off for years now on this channel, but it's time to give it its own dedicated video. It opens with an incredibly powerful creative choice. You see this cutscene with the horizontal lightning and largely blank background? Looks a little strange, doesn't it? Well, for years, I thought it was some kind of modern hardware issue that caused it to look like this, but no, that's just how it looks. In the game files, you can find, totally unencrypted and in plain sight, the raw file for not only this cinematic, but all of the many cinematics that play throughout the game, including classic hits such as Outro Happy and Outro Unhappy. Nice of the developers to let us cut out the middleman and watch the endings if we're in a rush. Not only that, but you can find all of the audio files as well. Who could forget classics such as Music Effect Scum 1, which sounds like this. And in my opinion, that's much more pleasant than Music Effect Scum 2, which sounds like this.
What do you mean you don't like Fear and Hunger? Are you an idiot? Well, let me tell you, it is one of the best games ever made, and before I tell you why, you gotta know I haven't actually played the game, but believe me, I have seen many videos.
But anyway, the opening cinematic sets up a tale as old as time. Our sister is being married off to an esoteric foreign count, which I believe was the Victorian version of adding someone on LinkedIn. And much of our family is going to join the festivities at the Count's Castle Malachi. And we're late, arriving well after our loved ones, making us Malachi's Malachus. That's one for all my Greeks out there. And when we do arrive, we become acutely aware that we are British, because we've come as tourists and immediately made a mess. Everyone's suitcases and travel bags are by the castle's entrance, and yet, no one is in sight. How queer. And I mean queer in the old-timey sense, and it's in no way a reference to the fact that they made my Ilvania woke. But this is no quiet, brooding game about exploring a castle to find your family. It's a loud, entirely time-sensitive game about exploring a castle to find your family. And I don't mean time-sensitive in the fast-paced sense. You are literally being timed against the clock throughout the entire game. If you fail to rescue your family members by certain time thresholds, they die. You don't lose if that happens, but there are consequences, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And something that really complicates this time sensitivity is the fact that the game is, at least partially, procedurally generated. So your family and friends, in the best case scenario, could be 3 rooms away from where you start. They could also be as far away as 4 rooms away, maybe more, if you can stomach the thought. The map has 3 main sections, each having its own unique style and difficulty increases, as well as their own cast of family members. And some of the family members are in set positions that won't change, like each of the 3 sections of the castle having their boss enemy that protects their favorite wedding +1, but other than that, they're pretty well shuffled around. And sometimes you will get unlucky and somebody that dies early in the game's timer will spawn far away. Talking about dying early, I remember looking for a physical copy of this game in around 2012 or 2013. I was in a shop with a high school friend and he asked me what I was looking for. I said, "Nosferatu, the Wrath of Malachi." And he said it sounded sad. That's how we used to say cringe back in the day, by the way. I think about that interaction often. Why did he call my cool vampire game cringe? I've forgiven him now, it's just, I should have killed him while I had the chance. All of the random elements leave you with one area that's reliable and safe. The spawn point with all the cases. You bring your family members back here and they gift you with things like, health or gun. So in this dangerous and unreliable castle, this area is very much your defensive station. Father, you misheard me. Now let's talk ghouls. This castle is home to many a foe, and I don't mean the English. Genuinely, look up ghoul synonym on Google and you'll get a pretty fair approximation of this game's enemy list. Some of the enemies are a bit more specifically identifiable, like dog or man or ghost, but the others more or less fall under the miscellaneous beast umbrella. And I still don't mean the English. I won't list them all because that would be tedious, but you get the slow boys, the fast boys, jumpy boys, flippy boys, flying boys, all the hits, all the big ones. And I understand on paper they don't seem to be all that interesting, and truth be told, they're not. If you've played any kind of action game, you'll be roughly familiar with the archetypes at play. However, where the enemies become more notable is in the usage of doors. You see, each time you walk into a new room, enemies could pop out from anywhere. They could be above you on little hidden platforms, they could be under the floorboards, they could burst through glass, and anything else you've come to expect from Linux users when you mention having a Windows PC. I can already hear them commenting. Good God. And generally speaking, the enemies are pretty cross at you, and more or less only you. When you're in a room with a load of enemies and a friendly NPC that needs rescuing, they'll more often than not just beeline towards you while ignoring your dad or your mother or your aunt's dog. But not always. I've seen them kill one or two in the past, but you would be surprised at how quickly they're able to sense the stench of a protagonist. And they're pretty brutal about it. This game is by no means trivial. Even on its easiest difficulty, it can be pretty unforgiving. But all of this sounds relatively standard. Where this game gets a bit more unique is, like I said, with the doors. And I don't mean that in the sad Satan sense. So if you make the mistake of letting doors close behind you as you explore, the game will consider you a fool and allow rooms to spawn new enemies, which makes for some interesting situations, such as this. So you can't really clear the castle in any meaningful way. There will always be more ghouls. Thankfully, they can't reuse the more destructible entrances, such as bursting through floorboards or windows, so at least those can be considered done. But the game doesn't give a shit about that and will instead spawn enemies in the most carnival haunted house ways possible. If there's a corner or platform or even something as simple as a dark bit of the room, they will spawn there. And that is if they are feeling kind. Sometimes they will just spawn directly in front of you in the middle of a well-lit room. And this is a bit of an issue because you'll spend quite a lot of time backtracking and escorting folk through this castle, which means you spend a lot of time having stuff like this happen to you. And if you're wondering about the music that plays when you're jumped, yeah, it happens every single time. There are a few different audio cues for different enemies attacking you, and here are some of my favorites.
Defend us, James!
No, you don't understand. It's not fun on purpose, therefore it's fun. That's how it works.
This is genuinely one of my favorite parts of the game. So much of the audio is reactive to what's going on, but it's not the most seamless or smooth when it comes to transitions. So if you kill an enemy really quickly after being spotted, the music just hard cuts off. I don't know why, but this is really funny to me. But it's one of those things which, while goofy, is really endearing. It's one of the several clunky elements of this game that feels quite ahead of its time, in a way. Between the randomization elements, the somewhat dynamic audio, and the attempted crossover between an atmospheric horror game and a more classical shooter, this feels like an early example of what is now a pretty big genre. Keep in mind, this is before games like Doom 3, Fear, Condemned, and it was well before the likes of things like Cry of Fear, but it shares quite a few of their elements. But it was also after Doom 1 and 2, Blood, Quake, and the more traditional retro horror-adjacent action games. It was, as many things were in the early 2000s, in a strange middle area, similar to things like Clive Barker's Undying. It almost feels closer to a contemporary boomer shooter like Dusk than it does to an actual boomer shooter. It's Schrodinger's boomer shooter is what I'm trying to say. And good lord, PC Gaming Wiki lists it as an immersive sim. Horrifying stuff, but I think it's an immersive sim strictly through marriage. Speaking of horrifying stuff, how scary is this game? Well, I'd say it's inconsistently scary, but not in a bad way. You see, when you begin the game, it is startling. There's a heavy atmosphere, loud noises, dangerous foes, and an unpredictable environment. Punctuate all of that with a constantly ticking clock, and you've got a pretty stressful time on your hands. But as you progress through the game and become a little numbed to its constant theatrical screaming, it can go one of two ways. I could very much see somebody growing bored of this game and kind of giving up. I totally understand that. It can become very repetitive. But how I viewed it was a bit like a cat. A kitten, more specifically. If you've ever had a kitten, you will know that they love to just run around and cause a ruckus. They'll jump out at you and chase you about and hide behind doors and all kinds of weird shit. They love to play, and at first, that can be kind of overwhelming if you're not used to it. But then you can join in. You know that sometimes that kitten is gonna be weird and unpredictable, and that's when you can start looking forward to it. You can walk into rooms and think, I know it's in here somewhere, let's boogie, motherfucker. Except the difference between a kitten and the ghouls of Castle Malachi is that the ghouls of Castle Malachi often succumb to the power of Christ. And where this kitten analogy kind of falls apart is when you get your machine gun, because at that stage, you're no longer playing, you're creating statistics. But weirdly, the fully automatic ghoul mower isn't the best weapon in the game. Not even close. That comes down to the chalice. When filled with holy water, the chalice is like an insane close-range shotgun weapon that can 1 to 2 shot basically everything in the game, including some of the bosses. So, actually, with what is effectively an ordained spray bottle, we've come full circle back to the cat analogy. Other weapons in the game include a flintlock pistol and rifle, wooden stakes, a revolver, your trusty cane sword, your slightly less trusty fists, a crucifix, and a dog. Good dog. What I find hilarious about the dog is that it's one of the few family members that they decided to actively lock up in the castle. Most of the others are protected by enemies, sure, but they're not like confined anywhere. In fact, some are just alone in rooms that they could easily walk out of, but no, you are the only member of this family that can function at even the most basic level. Honestly, you should see these fuckers attempting stairs. But the dog is in a cage surrounded by 2 or 3 armed men. They know this bad boy is just itching to kill people, like the dog Cujo from the hit book-turned-movie Cujo. But I don't like taking the dog around because I'd feel terrible if anything happened to him. Ignore that the castle itself is full of dogs that I annihilate for sport. Technically, the friendly dog is a reward for saving one of the other family members, as they give you the key to his cage, and while that is a cool reward, it's far from the best reward in my opinion. That would probably be the garlic. Sure, others give things like a machine gun or the ability to heal, but the garlic is both kind of overpowered and also very funny. It makes it so that, for a limited time, a huge number of the game's enemies will avoid you or at least hesitate before attacking you, which, believe me, is a very welcome change of pace. It also makes some of the later stages of the game, if you decide to save the garlic for those times, feel kind of brutal. You'll have several ghouls terrified for their lives and backing away from you as you deliver them swiftly into the past tense. To me, the family members carrying garlic doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's positing that English people would carry something that has any kind of taste to it, and somehow Balkan people would be afraid of it. But generally, I love that they've turned a classic vampire superstition into a game mechanic. That's very fun. It got me thinking about modern superstitions, and if we have any genuinely pervasive but pointless and silly ones. And I realized we absolutely do, and I guarantee a lot of you, or more specifically the people you listen to, partake in it. Over the last few years, you may have heard the word unalived. I fucking hate that word. There are dozens like it floating around on social media and video platforms, but unalived is the most prevalent. For those who don't know, The word is used in place of other words such as kill or murder. Why? Because people are afraid to say kill or murder. Not because they're scary words, but because the big bad algorithm might get them. People are so afraid that they're gonna get demonetized or shadow banned if they say kill, and you almost certainly won't. I've spoken about like real life gore and other horrible shit in my Sad Satan videos, and the algorithm was all over those. I swear like a sailor and say some pretty graphic shit, and yet I've only ever been demonetized for my content once. And that's because I said k. You can't say k. They don't like that. Lesson learned. People still go on about the adpocalypse as if it didn't happen over 5 years ago and has largely, though not entirely, been resolved when it comes to more mature content on the platform. And you might say monetization rules are different if you're talking about video games versus, say, true crime content or the news. And that may be the case, but then it becomes an issue of respect. The word kill isn't meant to be marketable. It's a word that carries the weight of the act it describes. To infantilize the word into its most safe and advertiser-friendly version is sickening. And don't get me started on saying pew-pews instead of guns. Say what you mean, you fucking cowards. And keep in mind, a lot of the time these infantilized versions of words are used specifically to make content that will be more marketable towards children. Take from that what you will. So yeah, using garlic to ward off evil is like using the word unalive so your content can make a whopping 0.3 cents per view. But at least garlic has taste. Wait, before I'm done with this side tangent, why the fuck is the word slay okay? Slay is one of the words of the decade. It's our version of tubular, yet it means to slaughter. People will say, oh, he really slayed when he unalived that family of 4, and they don't worry at all about that. What's going on? Riddle me that. Alright, let's stop moseying around and get to the real meat of this game. While there's quite the collection of people to rescue in this game, one stands out well above all of the others. Our man right there. Our man with the David Coulthard jaw. That's our man Greg. And you want to know why this man stole my heart? It wasn't just his rugged good looks. It's because in this game full of Englishmen and vampires and monsters, Greg's fucking Scottish, man. Fucking yes, Greg. Give him to the best.
That's it, man. Fucking punch him. Yeah, you got any change for the bus?
Our man Greg managed to get himself captured by a succubus. Fucking of course he did. Good on ya, pal. Been there, pal. Hey, come on. After killing the succubus with holy water or maybe a gun, we set him free. But I am left wondering, who is he? He's not like immediate family or an accompanying priest or anything like that, so I don't know, is he like cousin Greg, maybe? Holy shit. According to the game lore, he's actually a journalist slash friend of the family who has had a quiet fling with our sister and Mrs. Nosferatu-to-be, Rebecca. Fucking of course he has, good on you, son. Can't say I've been there, that's a bit more niche of a situation, but come on, man, good on you, eh? And Greg, unlike everybody else except for the dog, and while living up to his jawline and accent potential, actually fights alongside us. And he is not to be trifled with, or any other dessert for that matter. He doesn't need a gun or a crucifix, he just hits these actual hell beasts with the old, "Yeah mate, what school did you go to?" until they're no longer among the living. He can genuinely solo most of the foes in the game, but I've not taken him into boss fights, though I trust he'd still do pretty well. It's genuinely like bringing Batman along with you. But don't get confused, this is not the 1967 Filipino film Batman Fights Dracula, which itself is not to be confused with the similarly named 1964 Andy Warhol film Batman Dracula. Yes, both of those are real things, and hilariously, both are considered partially or entirely lost media. Can we get one of those lost media YouTubers to talk about these in that voice they do? You know, the one that's like,
This is one of the darkest pieces of lost media in history. Batman Fights Dracula.
But while Greg is our main man that we love to the ends of the earth, there is one more very notable family and or friend member. Grandpa. Take a look at that goddamn portrait. I have nothing to say about it other than, hell yeah. One question though, how old is he? He looks no older than like 60 when we meet him, and he could be a rough 40 for all I can tell. He is British after all. I mean, compare him to his children. God damn, what a man. He gets a pass on not being able to fight monsters because he's clearly overcome great foes in his time, plus he is actively fighting and beating the very concept of age. Why did he bring a machine gun to a wedding? Apparently our brother Wilfred can also fight monsters, but you know, who needs Wilf when you've got a Gilf? I regret saying that. There's something in the game that kind of annoys me, but I also kind of like, and that is that you can't save everyone. I believe you can save all but one person if you're clever about it, but once you've saved a certain number of people, the rest just automatically die if they're not actively being escorted by you. It feels like there's a message in there somewhere, like thematically it just kinda seems like there's something going on. I'll interpret it as LOL, the 1800s fucking sucked. Anyway, once we've saved as many people as we can and have moved through all the different wings of the castle, we get to see Mr. Orlok himself. And the bloody bastard only goes and kills our bloody sister, who, in a mad plot twist, is not Slendrina. Which is a shame because Slendrina really mellowed him out. Not to worry though, Slendrina is alluded to in the Wikipedia page for Batman Dracula, making this a bit like an MCU post-credits scene, but for insane people. Orlok goes ballistic at us and we have to lure him into some gorgeous 6 AM sunlight to kill him. Annoyingly, no other weapon works against him. I don't think even Greg would handle it, but lo and behold, he dies and all is well. Murdered sibling aside. It's then revealed that Nosferatu isn't even the big bad guy in his own game. That's his cool skeleton dinosaur friend, Malachi. Can't really fault Nosferatu for that one though. If my boss was a Power Rangers villain, I'd also be content in second place. And then the real last boss begins. Malachi has a cool mechanic, that being that he will grow stronger depending on how many family members and friends you let die. It doesn't really matter though, because I've got funny god juice and a funny belt-fed machine gun on my side. And when we kill him, we get the happy ending. Oops, our sister died, but we get to walk out of the castle feeling like a hero and looking like we're in hot fuzz. Side note, I know I've said it already, but other than Greg and Wilf and maybe the dog, you're really a one-man army in this game. Everyone else is helpless and just kinda sucks. And as simple as that formula is, I love it. The age-old trope of someone sees a bad situation and just sorts it out is hard to beat in my opinion. There's no like prophecy or chosen one thing going on, just a fairly regular person who walks into the worst situation imaginable and says, absolutely not. And then wins. It's incredible, I love it. It's like that song about Satan going to the United States and being beaten to death with a violin or some such. The good ending of the game isn't my favorite one though, because yes, it's triumphant and whatnot, but it lacks a certain X factor. The X factor that the unbelievably hard bad ending cutscene absolutely has. Just look at this. We actually don't know how to make cutscenes that look like this anymore. We lost the technology. And that's that. What a game it is. Not sure if it came across in the video so far, but it's a pretty short game. You'll beat it in a couple of hours and it doesn't really overstay its welcome, assuming you can look past some repetition and quite a healthy dose of clunk. But if you don't like repetition and a healthy dose of clunk, you wouldn't have made it this far in the video. And playing this game made me reevaluate where a lot of vampire media places itself within the realm of horror. If you're like me, you might have considered vampires, and particularly anything Dracula adjacent, as being like a pretty basic entry-level kind of horror. Like, you know what you're gonna get. But that's really not the case. Dracula and Nosferatu-based media get weird as shit very quickly, and the Wrath of Malachi is one of the more tame examples of that. Recently, I rewatched Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 1990s Francis Ford Coppola one, and by the name alone, you'd assume a pretty by-the-book vampire outing, but no, that's not what it is. The first 40 minutes of that film are insane. Keanu Reeves gets his cock bit off by a vampire, Mikolash from Bloodborne and the first boss from the Saw video game hose down some asylum patients, and Gary Oldman crawls around like this. If this is what people in the 1800s were like, then, you know, I get it, Oswald Mandus, I get it. It's a cool movie, and it just gets weirder from there. But I never hear people addressing that it is madness from start to finish. I only ever hear one thing about it. Anyone who dislikes Keanu's performance in the movie is wrong. Have you seen the rest of the film? Every scene is insane. That movie is about being afraid of two things: polyamory and Balkan rage. Everyone is acting in the most uncanny way possible. Everyone turned up on ketamine, and frankly, Keanu handles the K-hole better than most. The whole thing is like if the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Tim Burton, and all 1960s Giallo movies were blended into an evil paste and later necromanced into Francis Ford Coppola's strangest film. well, second strangest. Don't bring your cinema sins level critique into this.
Oh, Keanu's accent was bad, he was miscast.
You're a coward. So many strive for realism and perfection, and yet so few are remembered for it. Go back to talking about plot holes and continuity errors while the rest of us relish in art's warm embrace, you robotic fuck. Sorry, I've been very catty in this video. I apologize. I've been sick for like 3 weeks, and it's turned me evil. Anyway, my point is, Dracula and Nosferatu are cool. People make weird stuff with those two funny fellows despite their near mundane reputation in the zeitgeist. So yeah, I love this game. It's very rough around the edges and has a lot of elements which are more goofy than scary, but it's just dripping with charm. If you can look past relatively crunchy visuals and sound, and also tolerate some widescreen patches and whatnot, you'll find a game with a wonderful atmosphere and an incredibly distinct vibe. It feels like if November evenings were a game. I won't elaborate on that. Not too many games attempt to emulate the silent film era of horror, and this is my favorite of those few by a long way. I'd love to see more of this and less 80s and 90s nostalgia. Yep, I managed to find a way to complain about the overuse of PSX aesthetics in a Nosferatu video. I'm unstoppable. It's unlikely to happen, but a remake, or at the very least a remaster of this game would make me very, very happy. I imagine it would look something like this. Don't forget to turn on your AI upscaling to make the game look, how you say, a shit. The reason I say a remake or a remaster is unlikely is because, like I said at the top of the video, every company that ever touched this game is dead. I have no idea who holds the rights anymore, if anyone, because it's certainly not IdleFX. Fun fact, IdleFX's next game following Nosferatu was called Drake of the 99 Dragons, and it was considered to be one of the worst games of all time. And Google lists the platforms it was available on as Microsoft Windows and Metro Redux. I didn't know that Metro Redux was a platform. What a clever thing it is. Drake of the 99 Dragons was also released just over 2 weeks after Nosferatu: The Wrath of Malachi. It's amazing what you can achieve in just 14 days. If you agree, type #Nosferatu Fortnite in the comments. That is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever written. But anyway, I usually have some kind of overarching message in my videos. I don't know if I do for this one. I'm failing my ancient roots of watching 2000s sitcoms and Doctor Who. So let me cobble together some kind of moral lesson here. Scottish people are cool.